everybody. We're back with a brand new episode of Unfinished Business. I hope this looks normal and not a little weird because I'm actually using my cell phone because I'm having, as always, technical problems in my neighborhood. So it is nice to see you again for this April issue of Unfinished Business. I am Jeff Gallashaw, as if you didn't already know. And with me, as always, is my co-host, André Joseph of AJ Epyx.
Hola, amigo.
No lie to you. Or aloha means both hello and goodbye. So, but let's get into news this month because we have plenty of it, as well as at the end of the show, we have 3 reviews for you instead of 2. So this show is jam-packed. Hopefully not part 1 and part 2, but we shall see. Either way, exciting for you folks at home and exciting to talk to you. So first of all, some things have happened that we didn't acknowledge, like the passing of Ivan Reitman, writer, director, producer, Ivan Reitman. He's a colossal monument in this business. His son, Jason Reitman, is also a writer, director. You might know him from Ivan Reitman, you might know from films like Dave. He directed, of course, Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. And I believe, and Twins, fan favorite, amongst many others, and was behind movies like Animal House and, a lot of Harold Ramis early 1980s comedies. He died, unfortunately, or passed away. And sorry that we did not mention it before. And I know in particular, André, you are a huge fan of his movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret how much I grew up on Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and just the fact that he made so many great comedies, brought the best out of Schwarzenegger, brought the best out of Bill Murray, and as a producer, he also had a lot of impact too with Animal House, as you mentioned. He also produced the Beethoven movies. He produced Private Parts of Howard Stern. He even produced a cult favorite of ours that we should cover one day as a deep dive called Big Shots. So he's been around the block quite a bit, and when I heard about his passing, I kind of had to wonder if the only reason his son made Ghostbusters Afterlife was because maybe they all knew he was sick and wanted to come back around and, do the torch passing premise as an honor to him as much as it was an honor to Harold Ramis. But, as sad as I am that he's gone and his presence is going to be missed with the films that he's done and what he probably could have done, I'm glad that he lived long enough to see his son, carry the wave of the Ghostbusters flag and, really propel it for the future in terms of building a new fan base and, more importantly than that, giving us the 3rd movie that we needed.
Well, I mean, I'm just happy for the cultural things that he left behind, that he was a solid and wacky Canadian. And even like his later films that didn't achieve the classic status of his other films like My Super Ex-Girlfriend or No Strings Attached, you could see that at least he was trying something that was maybe more attuned to his era of the 1980s with the high concept comedy and letting it let the comedy build its own world and, with some modern conveniences and showing basically how over time it might be different stories, but it might be different time, but it's usually the same old stories. And
also too, I should mention this, his movie Evolution, which they tried to promote as like a Ghostbusters for the 2000s. I actually liked that movie. I thought it was cute, and David Duchovny was very funny in it. And it just had like enough of this combination of like sci-fi horror and comedy to really make it enjoyable as a guilty pleasure. It's not a great film. It didn't live up to the hype, but I don't think it's bad.
I wish I could say I was as maybe big a fan of that movie as you, but I remember how heavily it was promoted at the time. So that was one thing. It doesn't all come together for me in the end, that particular movie, but I'm happy, he was trying something and it seemed like something he was excited about. And he had the right cast Did it succeed as much as I hoped? No, but again, a nice try. Especially I have to give respect to somebody who's still out there and try. And obviously still has a passion to make these movies.
Absolutely.
So, rest in peace or rest in paradise, Mr. Ivan Reitman. And unfortunately, we also have bad news on the Bruce Willis front, where he has a debilitating disease that has unfortunately made him retire from making any more movies or retiring from acting altogether. And send out the well wishes and prayers and blessings for him, because I don't know him personally. I've never met him. And we've all heard good and bad stories about him. But I have to say that this generation, he's as close to one of the acting icons that we have, because he has these iconic action movie roles, and even his films that are not so fan loved, like Hudson Hawk, which is more a cult item. I personally love it. And then some of his like later career, which were a lot of straight to, I guess, whatever you want to call it now, streaming movies, where it's like he's top billed, but he's only in the movie for like a hot 10 minutes, but it might be a little bit more understandable why he was taking those roles also after finding out his diagnosis. So much so that, I mean, even the Razzies took back their career achievement award, with his retirement and, diagnosis. Tell us, how do you feel about Bruce Willis, Andre?
Well, I know this has been rumored for years that he had some sort of condition that was causing him to go through a bit of a decline. And now we know the truth to that, and I think I am remorseful for all the times that we kind of mocked his ability to do these like 1 day, 2 day parts in a movie, and then they pump him up like he's a big deal. And, I'm just regretful for all those times that I said those things, not knowing what his situation was. But that being said, yes, there's been a lot of stories about him behind the scenes not always being the easiest to get along with. Sometimes it seems like he was there for the paycheck and not really trying to give a strong performance. But I don't want to focus so much on that as I do why I grew up with him and enjoyed his films. And it's just the fact that he had that cool factor about himself. You watch him on Moonlighting, he was the guy that you want to have a beer with. The girls loved him. You watch him in Die Hard, he's like, an everyman type of cop in a extraordinary situation that you're not so sure he's going to survive in. And even though that got lost in the sequels, it's still like, you go back to that first film, it still holds up to this day as one of the greatest action films of all time. And he played a big part in that. And I do think he's a fantastic actor when given the right performance, whether it's in Mortal Thoughts or Death Becomes Her, or even in Pulp Fiction. Even if he's not the standout, he still fits outside of the genre of action to show that, hey, the guy's got some dramatic chops because he came from the theater before he blew up into a big TV star, movie star. So he has a wide range of talent that I think sometimes we kind of overlook because of the paycheck jobs. And, it sucks that this is the way that his career has to go out. But the most important thing is that even as he may be going for this debilitating issue with his health, the important thing is family and being close to his kids and having still a relationship with his ex-wife, Demi Moore. I think that's the most important thing for him. And I can only just tip my hat that, the rest of his life can be peaceful.
True. And I mean, he dipped his toes in all genres, comedy,
Yes.
blockbuster movies like Armageddon, action films, thrillers, dramas, you name it. Yeah, I guess you could consider, well, Sixth Sense kind of horror,
Yeah.
And so even there, he was present. Even like I remember he has a small role in a movie that's not the best in the world, but called
North
Assassination of a High School President. But
oh, yes, I did see that.
Yes, but at least his presence he has his presence felt throughout that movie.
Yeah.
Even in Fast Food Nation, where he has like a vital cameo role, he made the best sometimes of what he was given, you know.
Or even in Alpha Dog, where he was like one of the distraught dads. I thought he was pretty decent in that.
Yeah, I mean, considering you have Harry Dean Stanton by your side, of course.
Yeah.
I will admit that maybe it seemed like after movies like Mercury Rising, he might have lost his way. Like questioning maybe where he fit in, because it seemed like after that, that's when things got a little seesaw level. Like one movie would be really great, but then one might not be that great. I mean, even in The Jackal, he's probably one of the more memorable aspects of the movie, and he barely has any lines throughout, playing the rare villain role for him.
Yep.
So again, he's always somebody. I would say, how would I put it? He's an actor who everybody will always have an opinion on. No one can sit there and say, Bruce Willis. You'll always have something good, bad to say about.
Absolutely.
But again, much respect to the man. I guess let's keep on this bad news so we can get to the good news train. Ezra Miller, star of the upcoming DC movie Flash. He was in all the DC movies as the Flash thus far. Some of you might know him from those Fantastic Beast movies, where he plays kind of the sidekick to the main villain, but he's a weapon in those movies, I guess. And I remember him from movies like Perks of Being a Wallflower, which a movie which I love, and I love his performance in. But unfortunately, he keeps getting into a lot of legal trouble, and now the producers of The Flash are going full speed ahead with the movie, but they're putting any future plans with him in any other film or any sequels on hold for now, because his latest arrest was he got arrested in a bar for basically disrupting a couple trying to sing karaoke, much to his annoyance. And before this, he had reportedly assaulted a woman outside of a bar, strangling her, and, there's always, backstage talk of maybe, what's going on with him mentally, filming films, two huge blockbusters back to back might have taken their toll on him with no rest in between. So, unfortunately, this is not big news, but it is news right now.
Yeah, it's a disappointment and it's a shame. I mean, quite honestly, I'm not crazy about his take on the Flash. I thought it was just always kind of annoying to me. But I know there's a lot of people who like the Zack Snyder verse and would want to, keep everything intact. But let's just face it, the man has a problem. He needs help. And it's just not good. It's not good if you try to promote this movie and this is the elephant in the room that all the press are going to talk about is his issues instead of, whether the movie is good or not. Now, we do have a merger that's finalizing this week with Warner and Discovery. So I guess they're going to probably call the shots as far as his future, with that film and future DC films. But I'm going to say something controversial, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's what's necessary here. I think you got to pull a Christopher Plummer. I think you have to recast the role with Grant Gustin from the TV show, from the Arrowverse, and you got to replace all of his scenes that Ezra Miller was in, because they got the money. They could fix this movie. It's only coming out like next year. You got to get away from this shit as far as you can, because this is not good. And it's what the fans want.
Well, my thing is, I have no problem with him if they can keep him in the movie. And, obviously maybe it'll be a problem with the press tour, but I mean, we've done it before with Shia LaBeouf. So, but hopefully it doesn't get that bad. But my thing is, I guess, considering DC and all the Marvel with all these multiverses and all that, let the film stand where it is, and any future sequels, if needed, you can explain why he looks or seems different in another movie. That's at least where I stand, because I've never watched the television show, and I am for somebody, I guess, staying in the film if they've already done the work. I mean, with whatever the name of the movie was where they had to replace Kevin Spacey, it's a little more understandable when somebody's facing, those types of charges and you decide to take him out of a major release, I mean, he was all over the film, but it wasn't as much to take out. This would, you'd have to pretty much take over a production and almost refilm it, considering he's in almost every frame of the movie. So that might be even more expensive than just keeping him off of a press tour.
Then the worst case scenario is just put it on HBO Max. Don't even put it at the theater.
Well, it probably will after a few months anyway. It doesn't make any money. And this actually allows us to go into our next subject, since again we're still talking about bad news. The Oscars, where somehow that an Ezra Miller scene from Justice League actually was supposedly the most favorited crowd movie moment of all time. Who was voting here? I want to see these numbers. How even number 5 was more memorable than that. I will admit, I've seen bits and pieces of Justice League. I've never seen it, but no one has ever told me, man, you have to see Justice League just for this one scene of the Flash running in infinity. It's just saying.
Yeah, I'm like, that's what exciting. That really says a lot about 2021.
Unfortunately, we have to talk about the big thing from that night, which is Will Smith. I guess you could call it Will Smith's performance during that night, where he seemed jolly, he seemed good, he was there right in that perfect position. He knew he was probably going to win Best Actor because he's all up front. And then Chris Rock hit the stage and decided to tell a really bad G.I. Jane joke about Jada Pinkett, where everything seemed fine. And then all of a sudden, Will Smith gets on the stage, walks towards Chris. Chris bends over. I guess he expected, like, you know, maybe a playful slap or something. But no, he pimp slapped him on stage and then walked off. Now, that would have been controversial and fine, but then he proceeded to kind of heckle him by saying, "Keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth," repeatedly, which didn't help the situation. But Chris Rock's premonition did come true, did make television history. Now, obviously, backlash has been big since. You know, Will Smith he apologized to the Academy later that night, then online finally apologized to Chris Rock. He dropped out of, you know, the Academy. And, you know, now all the studios where he has had movie deals, they are putting his future projects on hold, including, unfortunately, Bad Boys 4, which I was waiting for. Yep. And, you know, I feel like this can blow over eventually. You know, he's going to have to make amends. But, you know, I would be faster to forgive him than, let's say, Mel Gibson, who somehow is making a comeback. But, you know, I agree that it was inappropriate and, you know, downright, you know, could have been criminal if really anyone wanted to press charges. How do you feel about this or the whole situation?
So I was at my buddy's house watching the Oscars when it went down, and, you know, we laughed at the joke. It was silly. Then Will Smith goes up on stage. We thought it was an act. We thought it was part of the show until the audio went off. In America, if you watch it in America, the audio was completely censored when he came down and started cursing at Chris, and you could kind of hear what they were saying just by lip reading. And then I went on Twitter and saw the Australian broadcast and saw it uncensored. And I was like, okay, this is bad. And then when he went up, when he won his award and made that speech about love makes you do crazy things, it was awkward. And it was awkward how, like, the feed was cutting in and out, like something else was going to go down. But what made it worse was, for one, he didn't apologize in the moment, only to the Academy, but not to Chris. And just the slap in itself hovered as a cloud throughout the rest of the show. Like the memoriams, all the coda wins, all of the musical numbers, everything went into the back seat because we could not get over that image of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. And so now he's paying certain consequences for it. And I agree, it'll blow over. I don't think it's going to kill his career. I don't think he's going to get canceled, in this day and age where everybody's getting canceled for over stupid shit. That's not going to happen with Big Will. But I do think there are those questions now about his marriage, about how can he make amends with Chris Rock in a way that doesn't feel phony? Because if they try to go on Jada's show on Facebook, that's going to look bad. I would not recommend doing that. And the kids ain't helping either, going on social media and saying whatever nonsense that they usually like to say. So I think
the kids.
He has got to just rise above it like he always does. He's a smart guy. And, I think he'll get through it. It's not going to end his career, but man, it's just looking bad, and it looks bad for the culture. It just looks bad overall. It's never happened in Oscar history before. You've had instances, whether it's Brando having the Native American woman take his Oscar, and supposedly John Wayne wanted to go up on stage and beat her up. People who crash speeches and things like that. I mean, that's normal, but this was like physical assault in front of millions of people, including young people that were probably watching these shows. And so it's just not a good look overall. And I think the Oscars also make it worse by a lot of the cover-ups that they're doing and saying, oh, well, we went and apologized. No, that's not what we heard. It's a fucking mess. That's all I gotta say. One big shit show.
Well, and unfortunately, like you said, for the culture, it also perpetuates a stereotype of African-American males also. I have the easiest answer to this. This is where we get them together on a project and we remake Uptown Saturday Night. That was supposed to be Kevin Hart and Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, I thought about that.
I'd be like, let them work together, maybe get to bond and then show, hey, let's let bygones be bygones. We work through our problems and we're giving you maximum entertainment,
Yeah, or just it could even be as simple as what he did with Janet Hubert with the Fresh Prince reunion, where they sat down, they squashed the beef, then they all got back together, and it was like the cloud was lifted over all those years of tension on that show between them and all her spouting about how terrible he was as a person, and it went all away. He could do that with Chris, but he's got to do it in the right situation, the right venue. Don't do it on Jada's show. It's just going to make things worse.
True. Yeah. Well, other things that happened at the Oscars, like you said, were put into the background, like Ariana DeBose winning Best Supporting Actress for West Side Story. You had Troy Kotsur, who won for Coda, the second deaf person to win an Oscar. You had Questlove win for Best Documentary, Summer of Soul.
Which was sad because he got overshadowed at that moment.
Exactly. You had, let's see, I'm trying to think of all the other awards.
Jessica Chastain.
Yeah, for, what was it? It was the name, Eyes of Tammy Faye, which I had to eat crow because I was like, he's not gonna win. So, I give her credit. We all know who won Best Actor. And Best Picture, Coda, which was a shock, but kind of more of an audience favorite. Yeah. So, other than that, I mean, I still have the same question as to, okay, for Best Song, you put up one song from an acto, but yet not only do you perform that song, but you perform the song that everybody thought was going to get nominated anyway. We don't talk about Bruno. What? I have never seen a performance of a song that wasn't nominated, performed on the show. So it was just like, why didn't you just nominate that one in the first place? That's just my minor nitpick.
That's a little weird, but I think most of our predictions were mostly on point.
Yeah. And from there we go to some happier news, which is another subject we skipped, but we never told our reactions to the Chippendales Rescue Rangers live action / animated movie. I figure if we're gonna go happy, let's go with the happiest thing of all, which is that. I like it because I like the trailer. I can't say I like the movie already, though I will probably like the movie. But I like the trailer because while it's meta, it's just so cute and brings back so many memories while being modern day sharp. It's sort of like I have more faith in it than I did, let's say, the DuckTales reboot show, which became more about the adventures and, totally different animation style and wasn't like, the misadventures of the original DuckTales, where sometimes they went on adventures, but then sometimes they were just home and things went wrong, So I'm looking forward to this movie.
Yeah, it sucks this has to come out 30 years after the fact, because when I was a kid, I wanted a Rescue Rangers movie because I'd seen the DuckTales movie with my mom when it came out in the theaters, and I wanted like all the Disney afternoon shows to have a movie, that and Darkwing Duck and Tailspin. And so like I didn't know what to expect. I remember hearing about it, that it was going to be live action. I wasn't sure if it was going to be any good. Then I see this trailer, and like you said, it goes meta, but it looks like it's going to be like this huge love letter to the whole Disney afternoon generation and anybody who grew up with Disney in the late 80s and early 90s, because there's a Roger Rabbit cameo in there. So like for me, I don't care. I don't have kids, but I'm kind of excited for it. And I want to watch it simply because it's just a nice throwback to my childhood when things were innocent and simple.
I'm waiting to see when Gadget is going to make her appearance in this, because she's totally not in the trailer.
And on a side note, they need to bring back those ice pops from the 80s. Those were awesome.
I loved them myself. I like how Goof Troop got a movie, but Rescue Rangers did.
And I saw that in the theater and liked it.
See, I did not see the Goofy movie or a Goofy Tale, whatever it was.
You get a Goofy movie, but you can't make Darkwing Duck. That would have been epic.
I think that's next if they make another, Disney afternoon movie. Somewhere Bonkers is crying in the corner, though.
Oh no, I don't want Bonkers, even though there's some fans, but I'm not a Bonkers fan.
I didn't love Bonkers, but I wouldn't be upset by a Bonkers movie.
That's what I kind of phased out of it.
I'm like, and Tailspin, they just got to figure out how do we make this into a movie exactly. And
get John Favreau to direct it, do it live action, just like the Jungle Book.
Oh, no. That would be way too expensive for something is going to go straight to Disney Plus, most likely. And I guess what you could say, this is all still happy news, but not as vibrant, I guess, or on the nose. Indiana Jones 5 finished filming, which, to tell you the truth, I totally forgot was being made. It's a movie I don't feel needs to be made in the first place. I'm wondering if this is going to be sort of like, to bring it back, Scream 4, where you think this one's going to make up for the last movie. So you're kind of like, oh, well, I don't really care either way. And then it actually ends up being, good. And you're like, damn, I should have seen it in theaters when I had the chance.
I think this is like sad news. It's not happy news to me. Listen, Harrison Ford's going to be 80 years old this year, and Steven Spielberg is not the director of this picture. It's James Mangold, who is a very good director. I'm not saying he has no talent, but it's like you've waited way too long to make this movie. And then from what we've seen in behind the scenes footage of certain leaks, so spoiler alert if you are watching this, there's supposed to be like some de-aging going on. There may be some time travel with a younger Indiana Jones and, characters popping in and out of time. And then supposedly I heard he might die at the end. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, who's supposedly Marcus Brody's granddaughter, is going to be the new star of the franchise, which is like, no, don't do this to us. You already destroyed Star Wars and kind of brought it back with The Mandalorian. Don't do this to Indiana Jones. I know Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was not the greatest, although I personally enjoyed it because it was the only one I saw in the theater of all the Indiana Jones movies. But this is going to be a disaster. I don't know why anybody thinks this is going to be good. And Harrison Ford keeps getting hurt on the set. I don't want to see Indy go out like a punk.
Well, obviously you're more caring about this because I'm like, after the trilogy, to me, everything else after that is not canon.
Well,
It
it
took
really
so
ended with
long.
Last Crusade, but yeah, I don't want to see it go down.
Well, I mean, also to tie in with this news, the news that Harrison Ford is actually going to do like one of his first ever television series roles with Jason Siegel's upcoming project for Apple Plus TV. I have to see a trailer before I can really say how excited I am. I mean, it seems like since most directors and actors are going into television anyway, it seemed inevitable. Maybe I wouldn't expect him to play like a role week to week, but I figure every actor at this point will at least have a cameo on some kind of television show that is going to streaming. Well, I'm still waiting for Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, and I think for Ford, it's just that time where he's already played all his iconic roles for the last time, and there's really not much else in terms of like, anything huge he could do at his age. I don't think he's ever going to win the Oscar, which kind of sucks. Maybe they'll just give him like the Samuel Jackson Oscar that he got. But yeah, I mean, it seems like an appropriate role for him to do at this point in his life, playing a psychiatrist and doing his old kind of grumpy way. So, I'm curious. We'll see how it goes.
I guess he's too old to ever like take a film out of left field. What was the Western with Gene Wilder, The Frisco Kid?
Yeah, the first
Uh,
go
you,
kid.
Something like that. Even though, if they ever decide to make another romantic comedy with Diane Keaton, he could be, the suitor this time,
I always thought if they ever did a movie about the WWE, like the formation of it, or like any of the wrestlers, he would make a great Vince McMahon. But I think he's way too old for it now.
Well, I mean, he played a McMahonish role in 42,
Yeah, it was pretty close.
So yeah, you never know. I'm talking about career semi comebacks. Sharon Stone has signed on to play the villain in the upcoming superhero film Blue Beetle.
Well, it should be better than Catwoman because at least you got the kid from Cobra Kai playing the kid who played Miguel playing Blue Beetle. So yeah, hopefully she'll make up for that disaster.
Oh, this is interesting because my thing is, while Catwoman is not a great movie, I at least like the style of direction, and I really wish that director Pitoff had gotten another chance to make an American film where it's sort of an apology to actually show off their skills, sort of like Daniel Espinosa with Morbius. He's a good action director, maybe not the best material, or maybe not the best match with the material, especially with a project that has a lot of stacked on top of it. And apparently it failed because I didn't see it, so I can't really talk about it or its style too much.
I did see it, and we'll talk about it another time.
Okay. Well, I had no interest, and only interest was sort of like why I watch Venom. It just happens to tie into Sony Spider-Man world, but apparently not worth it. Two more stories, folks, before we go into the reviews. Oppenheimer, the next Christopher Nolan movie, has gained yet another big name actor with Christian Bale signing on to be in the film. This film is becoming like a Robert Altman movie where you have a bunch of big stars willing to take on smaller roles so that it's like there are no regular actors in this movie. Even like the guy who comes in and like, the missiles are coming in, sir, is going to be some star like Tom Holland, where it's just like, where's the normal actors? Where's the union rep for a day player? But I still am looking forward to this, even though it is a biographical film. It's still going to be filmed in IMAX. So
Well, if it makes up for Tenet, I think he'll do a good job with this one. Maybe it won't be as ambitious. It'll just be more character driven and maybe more like Dunkirk to a certain degree. He needs it right now because he's just one of the few great filmmakers we got that are still doing the big blockbusters. And this would be maybe a chance to win an Oscar.
well, it's like, it's like he was like, I made Tenet, that's all action. So this movie, all dialogue you can hear. this time, you
All
know.
pretentious dialogue.
Oh, leave him alone. He tries. He's a writer, you know. And finally, writer director James Gray is going to write and direct a series all about Norman Mailer, the I guess you could say novelist, director, writer, uh, boxer, amateur boxer, you know, all around, I guess, legend, good and bad. And of course, one of the makers of one of the, depending who you ask, worst, best films, Tough Guys Don't Dance, starring Ryan O'Neal in the scene that has made it meme worthy again. And any thoughts on this I guess project?
Long overdue. I think the guy deserves a biopic. James Gray would probably do the due diligence of really making a good story out of it. And yes, we do need to talk about Tough Guys Don't Dance. It's a deep dive.
Well, I mean, this is James Gray's later career, so I feel like he's developing more, I guess, what you could say, audience-friendly projects rather than, let's say, movies like The Immigrant or, you know, his other early films. But, you know, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure somewhere he's writing, how do I get Joaquin Phoenix, current star of most of my movies, in here? If he ends up playing Norman Mailer, I will admit my interest it gains that much. And Joaquin Phoenix in a weekly series is that, you know, that might make me, whichever streaming service it's on, actually go to that one if I don't have it already. If it's Apple Plus, so be it. And so now we go into part 2 of the show, where we are going to do our reviews of like some current movies that have been released that we saw. Interestingly enough, I mean, I saw all 3 of these movies in theaters. I think Andre saw 2 of the 3 in theaters. So first, let's go with X, written and directed by Ty West, which is a horror film about a crew that is trying to make an adult movie in the 1970s. And they rent a house and are in the middle of making said movie when trouble arises. And unfortunately, they are picked off one by one. Just so you know, all these reviews are filled with spoilers. So, you know, I will say I liked this movie. I enjoyed it. It had a Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe and kind of locations. And it offers something that, you know, a lot of movies don't offer these days, which is nudity and sex, which goes into this exploitation. But it did so, I don't know, in a more tasteful way while trying to be kind of dirty. It also, you know, I was glad to see Brittany Snow in the movie, who I can't remember having seen her in anything since, what were those movies?
Bushwick?
No, not Bushwick. Actually, that was a noteworthy film. I'm not going to say great, but the Pitch Perfect movies, you know. And, you know, she's back to blonde. She's almost unrecognizable, you know. And then you have Jenna Ortega, who does seem like she's too young to be in this film, you know, but I guess is boning up her like horror resume with, you know, Scream 5 in this movie. You have Mia Goth as the star of this film, who actually surprisingly plays dual roles in the film. You have Martin Henderson. Haven't seen him in a while either. And you have Kid Cudi, you know, as I'll just say the black guy. You know, I really enjoyed this film. I know it's hard to say, but it was a fun horror film. I think if anything that was surprising about the film was how actually violent it was, you know, because usually, you know, in a horror film these days, like, oh, somebody gets stabbed, that's the end of it. You know, you just see the body drop. You know, you don't really get to see much graphic violence or the damage that has been done by, let's say, a gunshot wound before the person dies. But that was one of my complaints with the movie, was that everybody who does perish gets these glorious kind of cinematic death scenes, except for Kid Cudi, who just, we know he gets shot. and we don't even get to see a reaction on him. And if anything, I will say that this movie will might scare people of old people and what they can actually do. Andre, what did you think of X?
I didn't have a lot of expectations going into it, and I found myself really enjoying it after the fact. I thought that it felt like the old school Texas Chainsaw Massacre, going to a cabin and just crazy shit going on, and it's very down and dirty and feels like the period that it's in. It's like late 1970s. I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack is awesome. And I like the fact that a lot of those actors that you mentioned, like Kid Cudi and Brittany Snow, are playing roles that are totally unrecognizable. Like they really, like even Martin Henderson, I didn't realize that was him till like I saw the credits. Because usually he's always playing like a bearded badass type. And here he's just like this jolly, good old country boy trying to produce a porno movie. The only one that was recognizable, of course, was Jenna Ortega. But like you said, she's building up her horror resume as we speak. And I just thought that, yeah, it was brutal. It was violent. It had its scares. It's creepy as hell, especially Mia Goth playing the old lady and like her, horniness, I could say. Yeah, it just, that movie rocked. And of course, it had a post-credit scene setting up a certain prequel that I'm really excited to see. And I'm even wondering, since this is going to be a trilogy, where that third movie is going to go, because there's a lot of little setups that seem to indicate that Mia Goth's character, the main character she plays in the film, there's a lot more to her than what they show.
Yeah. I also like that Jenna Ortega, kind of her fame from, Disney shows and other movies is kind of used because you automatically think when you're looking at the cast, she's probably going to be the final girl because she doesn't exactly fit in with the rest of them until towards the middle of the film where she makes a decision. And I feel like that decision also kind of signed her character's death certificate. And that most of the film is now going to be on Mia Goth as, the star and AKA the final girl, especially, that things have changed when, the final girl not only has sex, plenty of it during the movie, but it opens the movie by snorting cocaine constantly. So, and there are also, other than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there are little, tributes to other films, like with the crocodile in the lake eaten alive, obviously. So I like that it pays respect to its elders while being its own thing, or starting off as one type and going into some unknown territory that you don't see coming. So it's not like, oh, and then the stalker killer goes after them. It's like these totally two people you thought were going to be more minor in the back characters, and now they're like the perpetrators. And then, like you said, with the prequel, now we're going to find out maybe a little bit more about their characters and how they got to where they are. So like you said, if there is a third movie, where are we going from there? From what we know already. And, my thing is the third one going to be called Triple X? Like, the Vin Diesel movie, series of movies that never seem to end. But my thing, would you recommend people see this movie?
Absolutely. They should definitely see X.
Yes, I agree. You should definitely see X, and if you can still, definitely see it on a big screen.
Yeah, see it on the big screen. It's worth it just for that 70s vibe. If there's even a drive-through version of it, go see it at a drive-in theater.
Yeah, the only question I have watching the film is, so you're making a porno film where at first it seems like, so he's only going to have sex with the same two women throughout the whole thing. That's his whole movie's, premise. But then, there is a third.
Well, he's supposed to be like a Black Dynamite type. They make a big deal about his big thing. It's Shaft.
But it's called The Farmer's Daughters.
Yeah, well, farmers' daughters get horny too. What do you expect?
Either way, definitely go check out the film. Our next movie is actually a foreign film. It is called The Worst Person in the World, which sounds like it would be like a comedy about a villain, sort of like one of those animated films. But actually, it's about a woman's life and her relationships mainly the one of between two men who end up becoming the love of her life. The one she starts off the movie with, who's slightly older, and the man she eventually meets during that relationship and decides to start her own relationship with, breaking up with the first boyfriend. But I guess the story continues for each character so that we keep checking in. This is written and directed by, I'm going to mess up his name, Joachim Trier, and it is co-written by Eskil Vogt. And this topped a lot of critics' best of 2021. I'm considering it for 2022 because that's when it was actually came out. I absolutely love this film. This film has its charms, it has its camera tricks, but it always feels emotionally resonant, no matter any type of kind of stylish, I guess, tricks here and there. Renat Riensu, who plays the lead, is gorgeous, and I think that's what works for the film is that it could have just made her this exceptional female who all these men just want to be with for her beauty or her brains, but they give her constant flaws. She doesn't always make the right decision. She talks about writing, she shows talent in it, but she doesn't go forth in that career. And what works is that I guess how films work. She ends up somewhere different than you probably would have thought she would have ended up from the beginning of the film. And even all of her problems with her family aren't solved by the end of the film. So it's more like we're watching a chapter in her life. But what I also enjoyed is that it shows, I don't know, how individual, how magical it can feel, like randomly falling for a person, like literally the world standing still, and you're the only two people in the world who I guess are moving throughout that world. And I just loved it. And it is also the end of Trier's Oslo trilogy, which started with Reprise, then was Oslo August 31st, which is a very excellent film, but oh my God, so depressing. It's like he took all the depression from that movie and made sure that this one was ultra happy, And I think I'm going to go so far as say that it might be in my top 5. It is definitely top 5 so far this year, but again, haven't seen that many movies this year. But I think it'll still be on my list by the end of the year.
Yeah, this film to me felt like one gigantic odyssey, and I'm always looking for a film when dealing with love and romance that's not always so tacky and superficial and the same old like boy meets girl, they fall in love kind of deal. This one has so many layers to it with all the relationships that the Julie character goes through. And then, you have your little commentaries about the Me Too movement and, just the politics of today and just the visual style, which is at times very dreamlike and at other times, getting into like animation and having sort of these wild, subversive, like dark comedy elements in there. And I think Renette, she was a find. This is somebody that almost, got out of business to do carpentry. And then this director said, hey, why don't you do this film? And now she's like a huge star as a result, with all the accolades that she's received. It kind of reminded me of the original About Last Night with Rob Lowe and Demi Moore. I mean, not the exact film, but just the journey like their relationship has, going from the ups and downs, and it's getting too serious, and then they start drifting apart. It's kind of like this, but more about this character Julie, and how every relationship seems to define her differently, and her life changes all throughout the 12 chapters of the story, almost at a point where it's almost reflecting like our lives as we get older and our viewpoints change based on the experiences that we have. Our perspective about love and relationships also evolves depending on who our partners are. I think this film encapsulates all of that and makes it so compelling that even the psychological aspect of it with the dad, the relationship she has with him,
Mm-hmm.
only adds that extra layer of substance that makes this movie worth watching again and again.
I can see and agree with what you're saying. With her taking on or learning, sort of taking off on every personality of every man she's with, that also reminds me of the bad, which is Runaway Bride, because Julia Roberts' character had that same kind of flaw. But also the good, Woody Allen's movie Everybody Says I Love You,
Yeah.
where Natasha Lyonne's character was quite the same way, where all of her interests would be depending on who she was dating. And it's a quality that I think a lot of young people, men and women, all have when they're dating someone new. It's sort of like seeing the world through their eyes so much that you almost become like them. And this film, like I said, I think is definitely a must see. You know, I will admit it, for people who pay attention to running time, it is a bit long, but it's definitely worth it. It's something you should definitely just sit through and enjoy and let it affect you. You know, this is probably something I'm going to say about the next film, but this is definitely not only a film, but an experience in of itself. You know, you would definitely tell people to see or recommend them seeing this movie, correct?
Yes, go see The Worst Person in the World.
And I would agree because, like I said, I loved it. This one, I can't agree with you 100% on X's soundtrack, but this is definitely a movie whose soundtrack you should seek out.
It's a surprising soundtrack, yeah.
Yeah, because it has all different types of music and it all works no matter what scene it's in, and some good cuts, actually, you know, in this film. So obviously, so far, X, we both agree upon that we recommend. Worst Person in the World, we definitely agree upon. This one, the next movie, we're gonna probably agree upon, but I'm going to let you more take over talking about it because, you know, I'm still in awe of the film even a day later. And that is I'm even gonna, this is how much I love this film. The masterpiece we are going to talk about, that is called Everything Everywhere All at Once, directed by Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinhardt, starring Michelle Yeoh, Stephanie Hsu, Ki Hai Kwan, who most of you might remember as Short Round from Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, and Data from the Goonies, all grown up. The legendary James Hong and Jamie Lee Curtis, quite a legend herself, and Jenny Slate, for those of you really into stand-up. As I said, this movie, so much to say. It's sort of like Licorice Pizza and Worst Person in the World, where there's so much to say, there's no way you can write it all down. And the film itself, at least for me, was more of an experience than anything. It was funny. It was dramatic. I cried 3 separate times during this movie. I think once for each act, you know. And, you know, I just, oh man, this movie, you know, for all the craziness and chaos that it introduces, it still packs a punch, like Michelle Yeoh, that you don't see coming. What did you think of Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Where do I begin? I gotta say, you know, you got Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness coming out next month. I almost feel like that film is not going to touch this movie.
No,
this was an experience, as you said, but just a laugh out riot almost all the way through. Every performance shines. Michelle Yeoh is excellent. And I even just read before we got on that they were planning this for Jackie Chan. And I'm glad that they gender swapped for her because she is perfect in this film. She is funny, she kicks ass, and she's dramatic. You know, her relationship with her daughter throughout this film. And again, I'm not going to spoil what happens, but there's a lot going on there that makes this film so compelling to watch. And man, Ki Hai Kwan, after all this time where we haven't seen this guy on screen, You know, it's unfortunate we won't get a Goonies sequel. Rest in peace, Richard Donner. And obviously, he's not in the new Indiana Jones, which, you know, they should go fuck themselves. But he is excellent in this film. He is such a delight to see, to the point where it's like, you don't even need Jackie Chan. You got this guy, you got references to the Goonies in there, you got like a little Indiana Jones reference, and he just nails it as this sort of struggling husband. And the way he plays it in the different multiverses is just phenomenal. And James Hong is great. He's always reliable, has his moments. Deputy Hazu, a role that was intended for Aquafina, very good in this film. And Jamie Lee Curtis obviously playing, you know, the tax person at the IRS, but, you know, different shades of her. I mean, this movie, you could go on and on about how wild and absurd this film is with all its visual cues, all its references, and it's almost undescribable how good this movie is because it's so all over the place. It reminds me of, like, I'm always looking for a film like RoboCop that's just satirical and absurd and full of action, but has something going on there. It has substance. This movie has everything and more. And I just, you know, even after watching it, I'm like, I want to see it again. I want to even buy the Blu-ray when it comes out. It is that good. I think Michelle Yeoh should get nominated for an Oscar. And I think it should be making a lot more money than it's making right now, because this is going to be on my top 5 of 2022.
Agreed. I mean, I like you said, the references, like the Wong Kar-wai editing,
Yeah,
in the, you know, flat, in the other dimensions that she's in, when it becomes more about like a romance and love story. I also, one aspect I didn't expect to get pulled into is that even characters who are so minor, you think at the beginning, actually end up, we get to see their individual lives played out in these multiverses. And of course, I have to shout out Harry Chum and the raccoons story.
that was
Because
great.
where the hell did what seemed like it's going to be a Ratatouille, just, you know, satire of that, and they made it into like an emotional story right then and there. And I'm like, I was already a fan of the Daniels. I saw Swiss Army Man. I didn't see it in theaters, so I'm not gonna be one of those like, I was there since the beginning, y'all.
I did
But you
see
know,
Dick Long, which I wasn't crazy about.
yeah, I saw that, unfortunately, also not in theaters, but that was only done by one of them. But you know, the other produced. But I will say they've come a long way. You know,
Yeah.
even though both of those films were strange and visually striking, it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like when somebody comes from the minor leagues and then steps up to the plate and just is hitting home runs continuously. It's like, where did that come from? Like, it's something where you didn't think. So I'm not trying to judge them, but you didn't think necessarily they had that in them. And it's just like, and this is your second film you made together, you know. So that is why this film, I think anybody and everybody should go out and see this film. You know, unless, you know, you're like, oh, I'm waiting for that next Transformers movie. Maybe those guys don't need to go see it.
Yeah, no,
But
definitely support this film. I think it's worth it.
exactly. Don't be the person who discovers it 10 years from now and is like, where did that come from? Why did nobody tell me about that? Or have you seen? No, this should be the, like how when a film becomes an event where everybody's talking about it, that needs to be this film. I need 50,000 conspiracy videos on YouTube trying to break this down and still not making any sense. You know, that's how much I love this movie. I think this is so far my number one movie of the year. It's gonna take a hell of a lot to move it from its spot. So that's why for the rest of the year, filmmakers, you have that challenge. Can you move me that much that you make me move this film from number one to number two?
Yep.
So obviously for the audience, we both agree, you definitely need to see this. And as much as I love the other two, go see this one first before you see the other two if you can.
Yeah, and see it now before they pull it out.
Yes, in theaters, and bring tissues and food, you know, because you're gonna need all your strength by the end of it.
And it's a 2-hour plus movie, by the way, so it holds your attention all the way through.
And yet it never feels long,
No.
or long enough, actually, because again, you still care so much about these characters. you want to see what's next constantly. And out of the 50,000 options that are given, you know, you're promised something. That's all I can say. And the last thing is, I am just shocked. You know, I'm really respecting Jamie Lee Curtis's late career decisions when it comes to non-Halloween films. You know, because it's like this, Knives Out. I'm happy to see her finally getting more character actors roles where she gets to stretch more and just not be the bombshell. You know, now it's like she's playing against that type, in fact, now more these days.
She's always been funny, but this was a case where, you know, now you kind of play with her age and, you know, yeah, she's got wrinkles and flaws, but it works for the character that she's playing here.
Yeah, she's always been somebody who's always had a good sense of humor about herself. So it's like she's never taken herself that seriously. And, you know, yet she keeps getting pulled back to Halloween sequels. You know, it's a shame. But, you know, at least, you know, she's working and she's still out there. So, but yeah, Michelle Yeoh, everybody is great in this. And this is, I will even say, my favorite Michelle Yeoh movie. You know?
Yeah, it's up there.
So unfortunately, that ends this week's business. But as you know, there's always unfinished business out there. And I have to ask you, have you seen Oslo August 31st? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. Andre, what movie would you recommend?
Have you seen John Woo's A Better Tomorrow? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome.
And with that, we're not in a balcony, so the balcony is already closed, but that ends this episode.